Okay, so are you ready to dive into some serious political intrigue? We've got our hands on early excerpts of Shinzo Abe's memoirs.
Wow. Yeah, talk about a hot off the press sneak peek.
Right. And this is posthumously published, which kind of blows my mind.
It really adds another layer to things, doesn't it? Makes you think, what did Abe want us to know on his own terms?
Exactly. And that's what we're doing today, walking you through these early chapters, like Sherpas guiding you through Abe's own words, his climb to the top, the bumps along the way, maybe even some surprises.
More listeners probably know the Abe legacy, but this is different, right? This is the man behind the curtain.
Totally. And one thing that jumped out at me was how Abe describes his early years in politics. It wasn't a straight shot to prime minister, like he kind of fell into some of those big roles.
Oh, yeah, like his appointment as chief cabinet secretary. He talks about how the news leaked before he could even say yes or no.
Imagine finding out you won the lottery before you even checked your ticket. But that little story tells you a lot about how Japanese politics works.
Absolutely. It's all about those behind-the-scenes moves, family ties. You can't forget, Abe wasn't just anybody. His family practically breeds politics. His grandfather was prime minister too, right?
Right, Nobusu Kishi.
Yeah.
And his dad held some pretty important positions, so it's almost like he was born for this role, whether he wanted it or not.
It really makes you think how much of it was ambition versus duty to his family's legacy, like inheriting the family business, but instead of a restaurant, it's Japan.
Talk about pressure.
Mm.
And speaking of pressure, those memoirs give us a glimpse of Abe's leadership style. And he's surprisingly open about it.
He is. There are parts where you can practically hear the gears turning as he figures out how to handle these complicated situations, like dealing with the old guard politicians or political scandals.
And that's where it gets really interesting. Because we see Abe as this tough, decisive leader on the world stage. But in his own words, there's more to it.
He's totally aware of how he's perceived and how important that is to stay in power.
It feels like he was always thinking 10 steps ahead, always calculating.
Oh,
As you said.
100%. And for me, the way he describes getting former Prime Minister Nakasone to retire is a perfect example. That's not an easy thing to do. You need serious skills and strategy.
Oh man, the stories those walls could tell. And it shows a different side to Abe, right? One that breaks that strongman stereotype. He's assertive, but also understands how to play the game, keep everyone happy.
And it's not just about handling things at home, right? As you dig into these memoirs, you see these hints about his foreign policy, almost like he's setting the stage for decisions he knows will be questioned later.
It's like he's leaving clues. Breadcrumbs. And you really see that strategic mind in how he talks about China. He compares it to a game of shogi.
For those who don't know, shogi is like chess, but way more complex. It's all about thinking long-term and even using your opponent's captured pieces.
Yeah, this is not checkers we're talking about. And what's really interesting is he makes this comparison years before his second term, before China became this huge global power. It's like he knew it was coming and was getting ready.
Exactly. It shows you how he approached international relations. He wasn't just reacting to things, he was trying to stay ahead of the game. And you see that same thinking with North Korea.
Which, of course, became a defining issue for him. But in these early parts, we're seeing his thoughts before the summits, before things really blew up. It's fascinating how he wrestles with the idea of using economic aid as a bargaining chip.
He doesn't completely dismiss it, but you can tell he's skeptical. Like he's already unsure about just giving them what they want.
And this is years before he's known for his tough stance on North Korea. Makes you wonder, was this always there under the surface?
It's like we're putting together a puzzle, right? We're trying to understand how his thinking evolved.
Speaking of interesting relationships, what about his description of Yuriko Koike? For our listeners, she's the governor of Tokyo, a real force in politics.
Yeah, and Abe doesn't hold back. He calls her a joker, which is, well, it's a choice.
It's definitely loaded. Does he explain what he means? Because that could mean so many things.
He does, and this is where his analogy gets even more interesting. He writes, without jokers, many card games can be played, but with jokers, they can have special effects, stronger than the ace of spades.
Okay, so he's acknowledging she's a powerful player, someone who shakes things up. But is he saying she's a wild card unpredictable? Or is it more like he admires her for playing by her own rules?
He leaves it open to interpretation, which is what makes these memoirs so interesting. We're left guessing just like in real-life politics. And it shows how important it is to think critically when reading any memoir, especially from someone as powerful as Abe.
It's not about taking his word as gospel, but using his words as a starting point for our own analysis. And for our listeners, it's a chance to compare their own view of Abe with his own account.
Exactly, because these are his memories, his interpretations. And they're bound to be influenced by his own perspective, his own goals. And one part that really struck me was his really blunt assessment of the Ministry of Health. Not exactly a rave review.
Oh, yeah, when he talks about how frustrating they were, like pulling teeth to get anything done, he clearly did not have time for bureaucracy.
It's like he saw it as this big roadblock to getting things done. And you have to wonder if this frustration, this desire to break through the red tape, influenced how he governed, especially later during those big crises like Fukushima and COVID.
It makes you think how much of that drive was about truly serving the people versus needing to be in control.
That's a question people will be debating for years. But these glimpses into his mind are so valuable to understand what shaped him as a leader. And it's not all about power struggles and politics. There's another side to Abe that comes through in these pages, one that might surprise people.
It's interesting you bring up those later crises because we often think of those times as defining Abe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But what we're seeing in these early memoirs is a lot of those same instincts were already there. You know, that drive to take charge, even before his first term as prime minister.
Right. And it's important to remember, Abe was shaped by what he went through, just like anyone, both personally and politically.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really surprised me was how open he is about his health struggles.
Right.
How much politics took a toll on him.
Yeah, physically and emotionally.
That part where he says he almost quit politics entirely after his first term, it's kind of shocking. Right.
Right.
This guy goes on to become the longest-serving prime minister ever, and he was ready to walk away. It makes him seem so human.
It really does. And it makes you see those later years differently. Like, did that early experience of burnout ever really go away?
Did he always feel that pressure, even when he seemed so strong and in control?
It really makes you think. And that's what's so powerful about memoirs like this.
They give us a peek behind the curtain.
Exactly. We see that even the most powerful people have doubts, anxieties.
They struggle with the weight of their decisions.
And Abe doesn't shy away from showing that vulnerability.
He admits to times when he wasn't sure of himself, when he felt overwhelmed, when he questioned his own judgment.
And those moments of honesty make him so much more relatable, you know?
It's a side of him we didn't often see in the news. So for our listeners who are about to start their own deep dive into these memoirs, what's the most important thing to keep in mind?
Don't just think of this as a history book. Think of it as a personal reflection shaped by Abe's experiences and, yeah, his biases too. This is his side of the story.
His attempt to shape his own legacy.
Exactly. So engage with what you're reading, question things, consider different perspectives, and ultimately come to your own conclusions about Abe and what he left behind.
Because as we've seen today, these memoirs offer a fascinating and often surprising look into the mind of one of Japan's most important leaders.
But they also remind us that history is rarely black and white.
Even the biggest figures are human.
Shaped by their past, driven by their ambitions, and grappling with their own inner complexities.
And that's what makes studying history so interesting. It's not just about dates and events.
It's about understanding the people, the choices they made.
And these memoirs give us a valuable starting point for that exploration.
So dive in, ask questions, and see where this journey takes you.